Chapter 1. The comment. I wasn't supposed to hear it. They were in the dining room, 3 drinks in, and already trying to outlaugh each other. I just slipped down the hall for my charger when Derek's voice cut through the hum of glassware and bravado. She's great. You know, super organized, low maintenance, good practice. It was the way he said it, offhand, confident, as if it were some clever compliment. Then came Marcus's voice. Practice? You make it sound like she's a rental. Laughter, louder than it should have been. But the part that lodged itself under my skin like a shard of glass wasn't the joke. It was the silence that followed. That half-second pause where Derek had a choice. He could have said, "Come on, don't be an ass," or "She's not just practice." But he didn't. He let the silence harden. Then, "She's not the forever plan, we're just stable, you know?" It's like a tune-up before the real thing. Another voice, I think it was Jason, added, "Well, here's to test drives before the luxury model." More laughter. Someone clinked their glass. And just like that, I wasn't his wife. I was an extended metaphor. I stood there in the dim hallway, one foot on the hardwood, the other still on the carpeted stairs, holding my phone in my hand like it could rewind the moment, as if I'd misheard. But I hadn't, because that was Derek. Always polished, always reasonable. The kind of man who didn't scream or storm. No, he dismantled your worth slowly, with half-truths and executive summaries. I went back upstairs, moving through our house like it didn't belong to me anymore. Past the framed photo from Big Sur, where he'd said I grounded him. Past the shelf with the candle he brought me from Portland. The one that smelled like sea salt and basil and promises he never made out loud. In our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the dresser I'd refinished last summer. The one he told everyone really pulled the room together. I remembered how proud I felt, sanding and staining it in the garage, while he watched from the doorway, with a drink in his hand and zero intention of helping. It hit me, right then. He didn't think of me as someone he built a life with. I was someone he practiced on. A placeholder. A warm body in the layover between college ambition and some curated Instagram marriage with his real soulmate. And the worst part, it didn't even sound like guilt in his voice. It sounded like strategy. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't storm into the dining room and make a scene or call him out in front of his friends. No. I walked down once, smiled politely, grabbed a glass of water, and went back upstairs, quiet, composed. But something in me went still, not numb, not shocked, just still, like a switch had been flipped, like a door had closed behind me and I wasn't going back through it. Because when a man calls you a practice wife, he's telling you who he is and what you are, a phase, a draft, a placeholder. But what he forgot is, practice makes perfect. And I had just started rehearsing my exit. Chapter 2, Inventory. The next morning, I woke up before him. That wasn't unusual. Derek slept like a man who believed the world owed him rest. I moved quietly through the house, coffee in hand, not really sure what I was looking for, only that I needed to start seeing things clearly. Inventory, that's what my brain kept whispering. Not of objects, of ownership. Our accounts, our passwords, the names on the titles, the lease, the car, the shared credit cards we used for groceries, for travel, for the points he always insisted on hoarding, for later. I opened my laptop and began a document. Just a basic list at first. Joint checking. Wells Fargo, both names. Savings. His name only, lease. My name only, car. His. But I'd made 6 payments. Emergency fund, tied to my freelance income. He didn't even know the balance. I wasn't trying to be petty. I was trying to be precise. Because for the last 3 years, I'd floated through our marriage under the illusion of ours. Now I was waking up to mine versus his. Every corner of our life felt suddenly labeled. The kitchen mixer? A wedding gift from my aunt. Mine. The couch? His parents' housewarming contribution. His. The apartment decor? All mine. The wall art? Mine. The ugly-ass bonsai tree by the window? Very much his. I opened our shared cloud storage and started sorting files. Tax returns, lease agreements, scanned IDs, passwords, travel plans. I copied everything quietly, then moved it to an encrypted drive. Later that day, while he sat on the balcony scrolling his phone and talking to someone about a big Q3 pivot, I tested the waters. "Hey," I said, "do you still remember the password to the emergency fund account? I can't seem to log in." He didn't even look up. "I thought you handled all that stuff. Just reset it." I smiled. "Right, I forgot." He didn't ask why I needed it. He didn't care. Because in his mind, I was still the practice wife, someone who wouldn't leave, wouldn't question, wouldn't act. But I was already organizing the exit plan. And when a woman like me starts taking inventory, it's not about what's in the drawer. It's about who's holding the keys. Chapter 3, The Pattern. It's amazing what you start to see when you stop trying to explain everything away. Looking back, the signs weren't hidden. They were just wrapped in soft language, dismissed with logic, camouflaged in compliments that aged like milk. The prenup was the first one. He called it standard, said his lawyer insisted, said it was just in case. I'd laughed, nervously, and said I had nothing to protect. He kissed my forehead and said, "Exactly." It didn't register as a red flag at the time, more like a pink one. But I remembered now, he hadn't let me bring my own attorney. "Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be," he'd said. "We trust each other, right?" "Right." Then there were the solo vacations. Work trips, he called them. Last minute, important, confidential. But somehow always to places that showed up later on our joint credit card as spa charges and tasting menus for two. I'd asked once, just once, why a consulting summit needed a $480 wine pairing. He blinked and said, "Networking." I dropped it. There were comments too, small ones, said in passing, but weighted. "You'll be amazing for whoever you end up with, long term," said during a fight over whether we wanted kids. "I think we're teaching each other what not to do next time," said after a wedding when I asked why he seemed so detached. "You're great, Alyssa. I mean that. You've made me a better man." He always said it like it was a goodbye. I used to think he just had trouble with vulnerability, that maybe I was too sensitive, that if I worked harder, made things easier, calmer, simpler, he'd eventually lean in. But now, with the comments still echoing in my head like a loose screw in a dryer, I saw it clearly. He never saw me as his person. He saw me as a proving ground, a safe place to make mistakes, a quiet place to rehearse. He wasn't broken, he was rehearsing. And I'd spent years letting him. But rehearsals don't last forever, and the curtain was about to rise. Chapter 4, Quiet Quitting, the marriage version. I didn't leave right away. I didn't scream or cry or hurl wine glasses into the sink. I didn't sleep at my best friend's or post vague, cryptic quotes about betrayal. There were no late-night fights, no emotional implosions, no telltale packing sounds behind a closed bedroom door. I just stopped. Not all at once. Just in the way a person slowly lets go of a ledge when they realize no one's reaching back. First, it was the small things. I stopped refilling his favorite oat milk. I stopped syncing our calendars. When he double-booked a dinner with his boss and my cousin's birthday, I didn't rearrange anything. I just said, "You'll have to choose." He blinked. "Can't you move yours?" I smiled. Already confirmed. He was annoyed, but not suspicious, because Derek had built his whole life on the assumption that I would flex. I'd been the adjuster, the glue, the wife who filled in the gaps while he played visionary. Then came the meals. No more warm dinners waiting when he came home late. No more packed lunches with handwritten notes. Yeah, I used to do that. No more quiet "how was your day" over candlelight. Instead, I ate when I was hungry. I cooked what I wanted. And if there was extra, cool. If not, he had a whole fridge full of options. He wasn't helpless. He noticed, of course. He asked once, jokingly, if I was on strike. I looked up from my book and said, "Oh, I just figured we're both adults." He laughed. I didn't. The intimacy faded too. But not in the way people expect. We still touched, still kissed, still had those routine moments, the ones that look like love from the outside. But they were hollow. Muscle memory. A rerun of a show I no longer believed in. I began sleeping deeper, dreaming more. I stopped checking his location, stopped texting to say headed home. I didn't care where he was anymore, because emotionally, I'd already left the building. It felt like watching a play you've memorized. Same lines. Same blocking, same fake smiles. Only now I was backstage, packing up quietly, while the lead actor kept performing to an empty house. Derek didn't notice the difference. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Either way, the damage was done. I wasn't raging. I wasn't resentful. I was rehearsing. And this time, I was the one practicing for the life I actually wanted. Chapter 5, Discovery Day. It started with a ping, not from my phone, from Derek's tablet, left face up on the couch while he took a call on the balcony. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even moving. I was folding a blanket when the screen lit up with a message that stopped me cold. You really think she's not going to notice? No name, just the preview. But that was enough. My heart didn't race. It slowed. That eerie calm that takes over when something inside you says, pay attention. Don't react yet. I tapped the screen. It didn't unlock. But the preview stayed visible long enough to catch the icon. A private messaging app he rarely used. One he'd installed years ago during a security audit phase, then supposedly forgot about. He hadn't. When he re-entered the room, I didn't flinch, didn't ask. I just smiled, handed him his tablet, and said, "You got a message. Looked urgent." He blinked. "Oh, thanks." He didn't ask what it said. That told me everything. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I got to work. He was a creature of habit. Passwords were recycled, vaults never properly encrypted. Within 10 minutes, I was inside that private app, and deeper than I meant to go. The thread was long. Months of casual deceit and digital shoulder shrugs. Some flirtation, some venting. One message chilled me more than the rest. Once the new offer clears, I'll end it. She's great, but she was never the end game. It wasn't the betrayal that gutted me. It was the business-like tone. Like I was a logistical nuisance, a sticky note to remove before moving forward. I kept scrolling, screenshotted everything, backed it up in 2 places, and then I found the folder. Not a work file, something worse. A zip folder buried under old tax documents labeled Next Place. Inside were apartment listings, 1-bedrooms, high-rises with sleek countertops and rooftop decks, places that screamed bachelor reset. One of them had a note under the listing photo. Big enough closet for her stuff if needed. Her. There were bookmarked moving companies, digital notes labeled transition timeline. A checklist titled Clean Exit Personal. I opened it. Transfer utilities, redirect mail, storage unit, talk to Alyssa. Only if necessary. Only if necessary. I stared at those words for a long time. He wasn't confused. He wasn't struggling. He was planning. Systematically. Quietly. Like I was a problem to be managed, not a person to be mourned. And suddenly, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt released. He was already packing up our life, at least in his head. And now, so was I. Chapter 6. Practice makes perfect. If I was the practice wife, then it only felt fair to turn the tables. So I started practicing too. Not for a new man, not for revenge. For the next version of me, the one who wouldn't tolerate being someone's prelude. It began small. Every Saturday, Derek would leave for his so-called networking brunch, and I'd take that time to rehearse detachment. I'd do laundry, but only my clothes. I'd clean half the house. I'd rearrange the kitchen cabinets to function for 1, not 2. At first, I felt weird about it, like I was play acting. But then something clicked. The day I moved his keys from the communal hook to a tray on his side of the dresser, just his, labeled with a tag that read D, I realized I wasn't practicing. I was preparing. I began looking at our apartment like it was a hotel room, temporary, neatly staged for someone else's comfort. I tested how it would feel to come home and not greet him. I took long walks without telling him where I was going. I went entire evenings without checking if he'd eaten. The space between us didn't just grow, it sharpened, like a seam splitting in slow motion. He didn't notice. Or if he did, he chalked it up to mood swings or stress. Once, he tried to initiate something in bed, and I gently pulled away. "I'm tired," I said. He laughed, a little too lightly. "Tired of me?" I smiled. "You said it, not me." The silence that followed should have meant something. But he rolled over, muttered something about an early meeting, and fell asleep. I stared at the ceiling that night, heart calm, breath steady, because I knew what I was building, and it wasn't another confrontation. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was an exit. I wasn't just folding my emotions neatly into drawers. I was tucking them away for good. Practice makes perfect, right? So I practiced detachment, practiced self-preservation, practiced what it would feel like to never ask him for anything again. And eventually, it didn't feel like practice at all. It felt like freedom. Chapter 7, The Ring Dish. It was a tiny ceramic dish, white with a gold rim, no bigger than my palm. It sat on my nightstand like it had for the past 6 years, holding the same 3 things: my engagement ring, a silver hairpin, and a cheap pair of studs Derek bought me from an airport gift shop. I used to slip the ring off every night before bed. Habit, ritual, like brushing my teeth or setting the alarm. A moment of respect for the promise it symbolized. But one night, I didn't put it back on. And the next night, I didn't even take it off to begin with, because I hadn't worn it at all. By the 3rd day, the ring sat untouched in the dish. Still sparkling, still whole, but meaningless. That's when I started noticing the things I'd let that little gold band excuse. Like the birthday dinner he missed 2 years in a row because client dinners ran late. Or the time I cried in the parking garage after he said I was too emotional to be taken seriously. Or how every time someone asked him how we met, he gave the same answer. She was just there. I wasn't a partner. I was a placeholder. So I stopped wearing the placeholder. That week, Derek didn't say anything, didn't ask about the ring. Maybe he noticed, maybe he didn't. I wasn't sure which possibility hurt more. But Miles noticed. He was my manager at the nonprofit I'd started volunteering at. I'd picked up a few admin hours there, quietly shifting my energy into something that didn't revolve around Derek's moods or schedule. Miles was sharp, quiet, observant, the kind of person who read between silences. We were sorting donation bins when he glanced at my left hand and said, "Lose something?" I followed his gaze. No, just stopped pretending. He didn't pry, just gave a short nod and passed me a box of winter coats. Later, I found a sticky note in my bag, his handwriting, no signature. Pretending is exhausting. Keep going. I kept it, not because it meant something romantic. It didn't. It meant someone saw me, and that was more than I could say for my husband. Chapter 8, The Night He Noticed. It was the first time in weeks he really looked at me. Not glanced, not nodded from across the room while tapping at his phone. Looked. Like he was trying to figure out when I'd changed the lock on a door he didn't remember closing. I was at the kitchen counter, chopping herbs for dinner. Music was playing low. My playlist, not his. A little French indie pop I knew he found grating. He stepped into the doorway with his usual confident slouch, shirt unbuttoned halfway like he thought the house existed for his arrival. "Smells good," he said, like that was currency. "Thanks," I replied without turning. He paused. "What is it?" "Just pasta," I said. "Didn't think you'd be home." That landed. He was supposed to be at a mixer, one of those career-building cocktails and handshakes events he never missed. The kind where he wore his wedding ring like a costume accessory, not to deter interest, but to suggest dependability. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Got canceled." I nodded, still not facing him. He stepped closer. "You didn't wait for me." "No," I said, still dicing. "Didn't think I needed to." Silence. I could feel his confusion ripple across the room like heat off a stovetop. "You always used to ask when I'd be back." "I used to do a lot of things," I said calmly. He leaned against the counter, finally noticing the ring dish sitting empty in the center of the island. "You haven't worn it in a while." I didn't answer. Just placed the knife down, wiped my hands, and looked at him. Really looked. And that's when I saw it. Not guilt, not shame, confusion. Like he'd been playing a solo game for so long, he hadn't realized I'd learned the rules and started flipping the board. He gestured toward the dish. "Is this about us?" I smiled. "The kind you give a stranger who's asked too personal a question. It's about me." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he had no monologue, no speech ready, just silence, and the smell of garlic and basil, slowly turning bitter. Chapter 9, The Backup Plan. I started with a storage unit. Nothing dramatic. Just a climate-controlled cube on the west side of town with keypad access and rolling carts you had to sign out. The kind of place people used when they were between lives, downsizing, divorcing, disappearing. I paid in cash, set up the lease in my maiden name. Every Sunday morning, while Derek went to his spin class and flirted with the front desk girl, I packed a little more. Out-of-season clothes, childhood keepsakes, framed photos I'd already stopped noticing. It was strange how easy it became. Like my heart had already moved out. The rest was just logistics. I started taking things in plain sight too. My passport, my birth certificate, a few valuables he never paid attention to, a locket from my grandmother, the earrings he forgot he gave me twice. At the same time, I was building something he never saw coming. Credit. Not just the financial kind, though yes, I opened a solo account at a bank he didn't use. But more importantly, emotional credit, confidence, competence. I took extra hours at the nonprofit, offered to lead projects, said yes to things I used to defer, and slowly, the version of me he kept in a corner began unfolding. At night, I rehearsed conversations, practiced what I'd say when the moment came. Not the dramatic confrontation he probably expected, just facts, measured, final. I even kept a backup key with a friend, just in case. One copy of the lease, one flash drive with screenshots from his secret life, one sealed envelope labeled, only if he tries to flip the story. It sat in her desk drawer, untouched. But I slept better knowing it was there. Because Derek had a plan. One that didn't include me. And now? So did I. Chapter 10, The Dinner Table Reveal. He invited them over on a Tuesday. His parents, crisp and judgmental as ever, swept in with a bottle of overpriced wine and thinly veiled condescension. The kind that masquerades as politeness but always leaves you feeling like your skin doesn't quite fit right. I almost canceled dinner. Almost. But something told me not to. I plated everything carefully. Nothing fancy, just clean, thoughtful. The table was set. The lights were dim. The ring dish was still empty. We sat down like strangers performing a play. Derek at one end, his father at the other, his mother perched between opinions and passive swipes. Halfway through the meal, she looked up from her salmon and said, "You look tired, Alyssa. Things okay at home?" I smiled. Things are shifting. Derek looked at me, fork paused midair. What's that supposed to mean? I set my glass down gently. It means I've been thinking about the future, what I want, what I deserve. His mother tilted her head, tight-lipped. Sounds serious. It is, I said, meeting her gaze. Derek and I have reached different conclusions about what partnership means. Derek let out a laugh that didn't match his eyes. Oh, come on, don't do this now. I'm not doing anything, I said calmly. I'm telling the truth. He looked at his parents, like they'd save him, like they'd reach across the table and scold me back into silence. But they didn't speak, so I did. I found your little exit plan, the folder, the checklists, the apartment listings. All the places you imagined starting over, without me. His father's fork hit the plate with a dull clink. Derek's mouth opened. You went through my stuff? I noticed the moment you stopped pretending, so I stopped pretending too. Silence. His mother shifted in her seat. Maybe we should. No. I interrupted. Please, stay. It's time they know who their son really is, and who I've decided not to be anymore. He stared at me like I'd spoken in a language he didn't recognize, because for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't asking. I was informing. Chapter 11. His parents found out. They didn't call right away. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even the next week. At first, I thought maybe they were giving us space. But no, they were giving me silence. Their loyalty was never up for grabs. I had embarrassed their son in their eyes, and worse, I'd done it while the salmon was still warm. Derek's mother had always valued elegance over honesty. She never said the word divorce out loud. Not even when talking about someone else. She's making other arrangements, she once whispered about her neighbor. Like the woman had contracted something contagious. So when I laid everything bare at that table, I didn't just fracture Derek's image, I punctured hers too. The silence didn't hurt. It confirmed everything I'd suspected. I was never the daughter-in-law they wanted. Just the one they tolerated. Still, I moved fast. I spent the rest of the week boxing up my life. Half of it was already stored at the unit across town. The other half, books, framed prints, a few sentimental odds and ends. I moved into Claire's guest room. She'd insisted, said I could stay as long as I needed. Derek came home on Friday and found the living room hollow. The rug was gone. So was the credenza we'd argued over for weeks before buying. I'd paid for it, so I took it. The bookshelf held only his titles now: finance guides, biographies of men who took credit for other people's ideas. He looked around like he'd walked into a glitch. "Alyssa?" he called. I stepped out of the kitchen, calm, measured. Holding a roll of packing tape, he stared at me wide-eyed. "Are you serious with this?" I nodded once. "I'm leaving." He stepped forward. "You're blowing up our life over a few emails and apartment listings?" That was just me exploring options. I saw enough to know I wasn't one of them. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I didn't give him a chance to gather a rebuttal. "I'm not waiting for you to admit what you did," I added. "You don't even know, do you, what it means to betray someone before the cheating even starts?" He shook his head in disbelief. "I can't believe you're doing this." "I can," I said, taping another box shut. The next morning, Claire's doorbell rang. She peeked through the peephole and muttered, "It's your in-laws, full suit and pearls. Great." I joined her at the door and opened it without ceremony. Derek's mom blinked at the sight of me. "We thought maybe we could talk, just get some clarity." I nodded. "Sure." They stepped inside like they were touring a property they didn't really want to buy. "We've spoken to Derek," his mother said, sitting down with her coat still on. "He's very upset, confused. He said you misunderstood things." I stayed standing. "He also said you threatened him with something digital?" "I didn't threaten him," I said. "I documented him. There's a difference." His father shifted uncomfortably, eyes on the floor. His mother leaned forward. "Alyssa, we just want to make sure you're not acting impulsively. Every couple has rough patches." I laughed, not cruelly, but with the kind of fatigue that made you immune to gaslight. Rough patches don't involve secret leases, burner email accounts, and exit plans labeled Q4 contingency. Her face froze. I pulled a small flash drive from my pocket. "If you'd like to see what I found, I'm happy to share." She didn't take it. Claire, standing just behind me, finally spoke. "I think you've heard what you came to hear." They left in silence. The door clicked shut. Claire turned to me. "You okay?" I exhaled. "Yeah. Actually, yeah." Because in that moment, I finally understood. Their silence hadn't been punishment. It was permission to stop trying, to stop caring, to stop clinging to a version of family that had never included me in the first place. Chapter 12, The Exit. He wasn't home when I left, and for once, I was grateful for his obsession with routines: spin class, then overpriced espresso, then errands he'd pretend were for both of us, but never asked what I needed. Saturday mornings had become his little solo tradition, and I let him keep it, right up until the end. The house was quiet, still, the kind of stillness that doesn't beg to be filled, just observed. I moved through it slowly, taking one last walkthrough of the life we'd shared, or rather, the illusion of it. In the bedroom, the closet doors yawned open, one side nearly bare, my hangers gone, my shoes missing from their neat row, just his starched work shirts and leather belt loops hanging like museum pieces. I didn't bother closing the doors. In the bathroom, I'd left the drawers clean. The marble counter sparkled, stripped of every serum, every bottle I once lined up like tiny soldiers. The vanity mirror caught my reflection. Not sad, not angry, just done. Downstairs, I placed the letter on the dining table. "Derek, I took what was mine. What's left, you can keep, or lie to someone else about. Don't call me. Don't chase me. If you want closure, look in the mirror. Alyssa." I meant every word. Claire was waiting in her car, engine idling in the driveway. She didn't say anything as I stepped outside, arms full of one last tote bag. She just reached over and opened the passenger door. I slid in and exhaled, a long, steady breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since Rome. Since the dinner table, since the first time I'd caught him dreaming of a life I wasn't in. As we pulled away, I looked in the side mirror. The house stood there, still and neat, like nothing had happened, but I had. I'd happened. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't look back again. Because walking away doesn't mean you're lost. Sometimes it means you finally found the exit. Chapter 13, What I Left Behind. There was a time I thought I couldn't live without him. Not in the dramatic soap opera kind of way, but in the quiet, bone-deep belief that love, once given, was an investment you never withdrew from. That if Derek left, or even just started to pull away, the ground under me would crack. I used to mistake his presence for stability, but presence without participation is just weight. And I'd carried him for too long. The things I left behind weren't just physical. Sure, there was a sweater in the coat closet, and one of my mixing bowls he always used to scramble eggs. But the real things, the ones with sharp edges and invisible gravity, those took longer to name. I left behind the version of me that tiptoed, the woman who second-guessed herself before asking for help, who over-apologized for emotions, who thought being easy to love meant being small, agreeable, and unthreatening. I left behind the voice that said, maybe this is just what long-term love looks like. The voice that whispered, he doesn't mean to forget, he's just tired. The one that bargained, give it time, be patient, don't stir the pot. That voice didn't belong to me anymore. You doing okay? Claire asked one night as we sat on her patio with cheap wine and real silence. I nodded, then shook my head. I think I'm grieving someone who was never really mine. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't have to. Derek was never really mine, not in the way that matters. He loved the idea of me, the reliability, the aesthetic, the function. But he never held the actual woman with both hands, never bothered to ask who I was becoming. And when I did start to grow, to ask for more, expect more, I became inconvenient, a glitch in his plan. So he started writing a new one in secret folders and backup drives. He left me long before I left him. And what I left behind was the habit of staying anyway. I used to think being the one who stayed made me loyal, mature, strong. Now I know better. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop holding the door open for someone who was already halfway out. Epilogue, the real thing. It started with a knock, not the polite kind, the kind you use when you've already decided you're owed something on the other side. Claire and I were in the kitchen. She looked up from her tea. You expecting someone? I wasn't, but I knew. I opened the door slowly. Derek stood there, eyes bloodshot, shirt wrinkled, jaw clenched like he'd chewed on his own pride and still hadn't swallowed it. Alyssa. His voice cracked around my name like it hurt to say out loud, like it wasn't his to use anymore. I didn't invite him in. He didn't wait. He stepped past me, into Claire's foyer like he had a right to be there. He turned, flailing for words. I came home and everything was gone. You were gone. There wasn't a conversation. You just left. I folded my arms. And? He blinked. And? That's it? You're just going to stand there and act like you didn't blindside me? I laughed, sharp, clean, free. Oh, you feel blindsided? That must be awful. Don't do that, he snapped. Don't turn this into some performance. No, I said. You already did that. You just assumed you'd get to direct the final act, that you'd leave me in pieces, quietly, over time, that you'd rewrite the story in your head so I looked like the burden, and you walked away looking evolved. He looked stunned, not guilty, offended. I stepped closer, voice steady. Are you upset because I left, or because I left before you got to? He didn't answer, but the shift in his expression said everything. I kept going. You made a whole life plan that didn't include me. You drafted your little digital escape routes, wrote new bios, imagined a new apartment with light and air and independence. And yet, you still came home every night and kissed me on the forehead like I was none the wiser. I didn't mean, he started. You meant every bit of it, I interrupted. You just didn't expect me to beat you to the door. He sat down hard on Claire's bench by the entryway, hands on his knees, like the room had tilted. I didn't think you'd actually leave, he muttered. No, you thought I'd wait. You thought I'd keep shrinking to fit inside your comfort zone, that I'd doubt myself just long enough for you to slip away clean. His eyes met mine, red, wet, searching for a version of me that would still bend, still make excuses. But that version was gone, and all that remained was the woman he'd underestimated. I didn't see it, he whispered. I didn't see what I had. I nodded slowly. That's the thing about arrogance. It doesn't just blind you. It makes you smug enough to think the people holding you up will never let go. Claire appeared then, arms folded, standing behind me like a silent line in the sand. Derek stood, took a shaky breath, and looked like he wanted to say something else. Something final, but no words came. I opened the door. This time, he walked through it, and I didn't watch him go. Because the real ending wasn't his breakdown. It was mine, when I stopped performing loyalty for someone who had already exited the stage. And in the weeks that followed, something new bloomed. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, but real peace. My peace. The kind that didn't need permission or applause. The kind that came after the final curtain.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.